So we will begin by roll call, and we'll begin with our advisory members, Dr. Figueroa, Dr. Handy, Dr. Linden.
Here.
Dr. Reese.
Here.
Chair Stevens.
Here.
Vice Chair Martin.
Here.
Secretary Fletcher. Regent Bogard.
Here.
Regent Cox. Regent Finan.
Here.
Regent Girdler. Regent Green.
Here.
Regent Hamilton. Regent Herding.
Here.
Regent Jackson.
Here.
Regent Rabinowitz.
Here.
And Regent Smith. Regent Whitten.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. However, we're not discussing or taking action. We're simply discussing the Huron update, so we can go ahead and get started. If anyone does show up, we will note their presence.
And please note, this is Hannah, just for the record, that our advisory presidents were just sent the link. That was an omission on my part that they didn't get it earlier. So I'm thankful that two of them are here, but I believe that Dr. Handy and Dr. Figueroa could not join us. So just a note.
Thank you all. I'd like to call the order the Kentucky Community College Board of Regents, and this is a virtual meeting that includes all regents have been invited. You have the minutes of the last Huron report, which is January the 17th, 2023. You've had those. Are there any corrections or need adjustments on that? And hearing none, I will assume those are approved. Before we begin, I'd like to remind the regents that this meeting is being conducted according with open meetings and being live streamed to all our faculty, staff, students, and general public. Unlike some of the recent meetings, I do not anticipate the need to go in a closed session. And with that is, before I turn the meeting over to Pam, I'd like to announce the departure of Dr. Sarah Potter. At this point, for the Huron Project, General Counsel Duncan has graciously volunteered to be the spokesperson and the facilitator of this. I also would like to remind anyone that is watching virtually that if you have any questions or concerns, please address those to Counsel Duncan. With that, I will turn it over to Pam Duncan, the facilitator for the Huron for the remainder of this program. Ms. Duncan?
Thank you, Chair Stevens, and I am quite honored to be able to take over this project. We've had quite a few really good meetings, I think, and feel as if we are moving forward in this project. Prior to this meeting, I did send out some emails just to alert everyone yet once again that this meeting was taking place and that this project depends on their participation. So I am hoping that everyone out there in the system is listening and is feeling free to recommend, to make suggestions, to provide feedback so that we can move forward and the Huron project will be as successful as it can be. So I'm going to give it over to Veronica, whoever is going to talk at this moment, and we will see what progress we're making.
Sounds good. Thank you. And we do have a few slides to bring up, and I will. So the purpose of today's conversation really is to provide an overview of where we are predominantly on the space utilization, the academic programming, and financial and org assessment. We are meeting with the advisory committee for the compensation and equity study work next week. And we will plan on updating you all on that work in our next Board of Regents conversation in March. So I will actually hand it over to Chris to walk through a few initial slides.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for meeting with us today. The last time we came to you in January, we had really just started our conversations. And since then, we have hosted a lot of conversations. So I think we are able to now share kind of some of the things we're hearing, some of the themes that have bubbled up to the top. Since the last time we met with you, we've now hosted all these interviews with system office folks and college leadership. We've hosted over 20 focus groups with peer teams and a student focus group. We hosted all those town halls that I think many of you attended, or attended more than one of them. So thank you for that. I was in 11 of the 17 town halls, and I had 100, 150, upwards of 200 in a couple of them for some of the larger colleges. So we had very good attendance there. I think the word is out on this project. And I think those meetings were a great opportunity to get the community engaged and share their perspectives. And then again, we've received a lot of data that we've been digging through. So where we're at in the project right now, if you go to the next slide, is in this February timeframe. You can see that there's still a long runway for some of these work streams. So we are kind of viewing this right now as wrapping up our understanding of the current state and starting to shift towards the opportunity identification, taking some of the hypotheses that we have and building those out and seeing which ones still are hypotheses and are actually something that could move forward, or, you know, at times we'll identify some hypotheses and then they aren't really opportunities anymore. So we're kind of in that early right now, seeing what sticks through these conversations and through our data analysis. The next handful of slides are our way to try to synthesize all those conversations down into a few high-level themes and observations here. As I said, we've met with 2,000 or so folks through those town halls and a number of one-on-one conversations or group conversations. So it's really hard to boil everything down to a handful of things here. So we're trying our best. These would be what we here on consider the things that have come up in almost all of our conversations so far. So this first slide is some strengths that we wanted to acknowledge. The first on the top left is curriculum diversification. I think in almost all of our conversations, the colleges really value their ability to provide the offerings, academic offerings for their community. It felt like they liked the value of the flexibility that they can offer what makes sense to them, what their community needs. Right in line with that would be this next bullet point about commitment to community. A lot of the colleges commented that they loved the community part of the KCTCS, the capital C community, that they are able to engage with the people around in their local communities. A lot of them are offering things on campus, bringing in different organizations and different partnerships with their community, and also have good pulse on what the people in their areas need. The third, and kind of right in line with that, would be students first. A lot of the conversation was around making decisions and how students are at the forefront of those decisions being made. That came up in basically every single one of our conversations, which feels kind of obvious, but that doesn't always happen at other colleges and other systems. Sometimes administration think about administration and don't always think through how it trickles down to the students. And this came up in almost every one of our conversations. The fourth one touch on was employee collaboration. We met with 20 or so of the peer teams, all the financial aid people getting together, all the Marcoms people getting together, all the insert function. We met with those peer teams and they were very collaborative. There was a lot of good sharing. This doesn't always happen at other state systems or higher ed systems. Sometimes there's a little bit of territorialness or competitiveness, and people not sharing thoughts and best practices. We wanted to just share back that what we're seeing in those groups and hearing from the individuals in those groups, this seems like a great value add to KCTCS, and shows the unity and collaboration across the system. The last one we wanted to talk about was value proposition. We heard so many great stories when we were traveling around Kentucky the last month or so, stories of offering programs to people that are recently released from prison, people offering, colleges offering programs to recent people that are out of addiction programs. And stories like that were just really show the value of the colleges, show the value of the programs that you can offer, changing people's trajectory of their life. Just some really awesome stories. I think the one downside that we heard a number of times though was the challenges that some colleges have with sharing some of those stories and sharing the value that you can have. So I know this slide is intended to talk about strengths, but did want to acknowledge that I think there's even more opportunity to share the good word, spread the good word of everything that's happening at these colleges. Then we have 3 more slides where we wanted to just share a couple other specific themes that came up during our conversations, either interviews, town halls, or focus groups. So the first one we wanted to share was about system-wide initiatives. I think there is an understanding that these are good value add, but there was also the yin and yang here would be that sometimes some colleges felt like there were initiatives pushed down on them that didn't reflect what is needed for them. The idea that maybe there are some initiatives that just don't make sense for a certain college depending on the populations they serve. So we wanted to acknowledge the pros and cons here. You'll see in a number of these things that we're going to talk through, there's kind of a yin and yang here of college and system. And we're not really intending to say one is good or right or wrong or better. We're really just trying to acknowledge what we're hearing. The other thing that I would say is we are really just trying to get an understanding of the current state right now as we move towards opportunity identification and hypothesis development. So just making sure that we have an understanding of the complexities and the challenges and the roles and responsibilities of college versus system. So if I do say something, it is not intended to point fingers at college or system strengths or weaknesses, things like that. It's really just us reflecting back on what we heard from colleges and from system. The second thing that we heard a lot about was just colleges really valuing their individuality. They're able to bring their own brand, their own academic programs, their own accreditation that came up in a number of them, to be able to serve their populations. The yin and yang here, sorry to keep saying that, but the balancing act here would just be the system versus the college. How do we think through branding? How do we think through program offerings? How do we think through service offerings on that spectrum of individuality to system? The third thing that we heard a number of times was about communications and how sometimes there isn't as much transparency into decisions being made across the system, as well as maybe there is some transparency at certain levels, but it doesn't trickle all the way down to all the people that should be in the loop on things, or decisions are made without maybe looping in all the appropriate people that should be involved in that decision making. There's a lot more layers to that, and layers to each of the things that we're laying out here. This is really just at a high level what we're trying to share as our updates. On the next slide, we had some themes around employee morale. All 3 of these tie in together, so they're shown as 3 different themes, but they really all link together. One would be compensation. That came up in every single town hall that we had, was feeling that people are underpaid, underappreciated, and struggles with attracting and retaining talent. The second is, again, tied right back to that, but high levels of turnover, resource constraints, feeling like some departments or colleges are understaffed. And then as you have turnover, as you have places that are understaffed, as you have people that feel underpaid, a big challenge we heard about was succession planning and not feeling like there's good line of sight into how we fill those vacant positions, how we keep that knowledge transferred to the next group of people that are going to pick up that work. This is again a few negative things here. I did want to comment the number of people that we heard 25, 30, 35, 40 years of experience at one college or within the system was so many folks. It was so impressive to hear the level of dedication that we heard. Just people really dedicated. I know some folks on this call have been here for a number of years, which is incredible. So I know some of these are about turnover and leaving and challenges, but did want to also comment some of the successes we heard there.
So,
and then one last, yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we move on to the next part, I think Regent Finan had a question, and I'd like her to state it because not everyone can see the chat.
Yeah,
Sure.
sorry, I kind of was just rolling along and missed some things in the chat here.
That's
Can you
okay.
provide examples of some system-wide initiatives?
Yeah, just going back to the system-wide initiatives, the clarity, the engagement, can you speak specifically to that so that we have a feel for what that means?
Yeah. Let me think. Veronica, do you have any top of mind that you have?
Sure. So a couple of examples that come to mind are around the choosing of systems. So we heard PeopleSoft, we heard Radius, we heard Blackboard as being areas that, again, all related with system-wide initiatives, but also trickle-down communications of transparency around how those decisions were made.
Were the decisions ineffective? I mean, did you get the sense that what was chosen was ineffective, or it was just the process in which they were chosen?
It was more that I would say more around the process of, again, the communication that occurred around the system did not engage individuals throughout the process, but was a decision made and communicated to the colleges.
I would just add too, I think some of the conversations that we had as it relates to maybe some of the technical tools or systems that are chosen, sometimes I think how it would get everything I need to see a comprehensive view of a student, right? So, and this piece is great, but maybe if someone had asked or if I could have explained, this is what we really need. So we've got a lot of really great things, but sometimes it doesn't integrate in the way that we need it to. And so I think that might be an example for like a student system, a CRM system or something of that nature, a way to track a student comprehensively was one of the examples.
So ineffective tools or implementation.
Implementation, right. So maybe the tools are good, but maybe not always meeting the exact needs that are needed at the college level. So it's great. They're not saying, no, we don't appreciate it. It's just, gosh, if these could talk to each other better, or if we had a little input into how we could integrate them better, then I wouldn't have to have a shadow system on the side to get what I need or try to pull different reports that I need. Could they all work together? I think that's a good example.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarity.
Sure.
I think a couple other examples that came to mind. We heard about some initiatives to engage different student populations. So a big push from the system office for more veteran students, or system office pushing for more dual enrolled students or something like that. I think are a couple other examples, and people on the phone might have more context than that, but those are a couple other things we heard about.
I thought I saw Regent Fletcher had a question, but I don't see her hand up any longer. She may have dropped off, actually.
No, I'm here. I was tinkering with the hand up, hand down thing, and I thought at first they were about to answer it, so I took my hand down, but I don't think we fully got there. So my question is just to further explore that topic that Regent Finan brought up, in that it may not be an ineffective tool, but if they're feeling like that initiatives are being driven from the center out, did anyone bring suggestions for solutions in any of these concerns that were voiced, or was it only, here are the problems, we don't really have any solutions?
Yeah, so sometimes we did hear just complaints, admittedly, but sometimes we also did have some solution talking, and that will come out in our next couple of reports. But for one example, we heard about some effort that felt pushed down on the system, but then there were no tools or templates or things like that for the colleges to leverage. So if we could think through, if we're going to have all 16 colleges do something, can we pull together some template, some tool or something that can make their jobs easier, and it's done the same way, 16 ways done the same way, rather than everyone feeling like they need to go recreate something and fill the gap that is being requested of them, is one example.
I think too, and it wasn't, in a number of cases, it was, we have the peer teams, we're able to get together and discuss the needs of the colleges or a policy or an approach or whatever it might be. And the suggestions are listened to, right? There's discussion, there's dialogue, but then sometimes when the process or the policy comes back, or the tool, whatever it might be, it's a little bit different than maybe what that discussion sounded like when that feedback was given. And it's not, and the way it was sometimes vocalized, it's not that there was a change. That's not so much minded, but not always understanding why the change was made from the suggestion or the feedback or what have you. So maybe it's a risk compliance, area for why a change was made or what have you. So sometimes it just goes back to that clarity of the why, especially when they feel they have given that feedback, but it comes back a little bit different than maybe what was anticipated. What's that delta of the why?
Okay, if there are no other questions, then we'll move along, Chris, or whoever is next.
Yeah, we have one more of these types of slides, and then we can move on to the next section. So these ones also tie together pretty well back to roles and responsibilities. We heard about a number of what processes that feel archaic or paper-based. I think there is an opportunity to enhance some of these, automate some of these, bring them into the 21st century or into the 2020s. The second thing would be about roles and responsibilities. We heard a number of times that where the system ends and where the colleges start can be a challenge, in knowing that some of those handoffs. The third is about administrative effort, and this is kind of my comment about the tools and can we do something the same way rather than everyone recreating the wheel. But are there ways that we can reduce some duplicative efforts here on administrative tools? And the last one is about training and professional development. A lot of people were commenting about there's a lack of training. A number of people saying that they've never been to a national conference for their specific function to learn best practices, or we've now shifted to remote work, or we've shifted to remote learning. And as a faculty member or as a staff member, I haven't been trained effectively on how to use this as a new pedagogy for teaching or doing my work remotely. So that's one where thinking through the leverage and size and scale of 16 colleges, is there some lessons learned, best practices that we can share? If we can't send everyone to a national conference, can we send a representative and they can share back or something like that? So we just shared a number of slides that are kind of our way of synthesizing down the hundreds of conversations we've had, the 500 hours of conversations we've been in, into just a handful of slides. So there's a lot of layers that is hidden, but I will say that this is hopefully giving you all an eye towards what we're thinking through as, there's opportunities embedded in here. As you can think through the challenges we're hearing, our job is to try to think through how we can solve some of these challenges. And then we have a couple more slides for Veronica's going to share with you all.
Great. So to Chris's point just now, the last month and a half or so really has been focused on engaging individuals, ensuring that we not only understand the current state operations, but also hear the strengths and areas of opportunity. So if we move on to the next slide, we have also begun digging into data analysis, work stream specific conversations, and we do have a high level slide for each of the work streams, so space, academic programming, and finance and org, that we wanted to walk through. I recognize that we only have a couple minutes left, so I will walk through them at a particularly high level. But when it comes to space utilization, again, based on the initial analyses and based on our conversations, we've really been identifying or hearing and seeing four key themes. One is around space distribution. So based on our data analysis, it does look like majority of space is allocated towards lab and non-assignable space, which is not uncommon by any means. And in the next few weeks, we'll continue evaluating the utilization of this space and what it is being used for. The second takeaway is around space request process and space governance. So most general space requests and any adjustments seem to be taking place at the local college level. That said, there is support from the system office available for any larger projects or anything requested by the colleges. And this is an opportunity to continue collaborating and clarify this process and this relationship. Third is space scheduling systems, which goes back to our previous point as well. It's based on our conversations, PeopleSoft and Archibus are the primary tools for scheduling. That said, colleges may leverage tools outside of that. So either shadow systems or they leverage Excel to fill in any gaps, which may cause confusion around the single source of truth when it comes to data. And then lastly is around academic space utilization. So again, based on our initial analysis, it looks like colleges schedule relatively few classes after 3:30 p.m., as well as Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. This does seem to align with student demand from what we have heard, but we will, again, continue evaluating opportunities to leverage this space. And the next slide, so the next work stream is around academic programming. I will say we are very much heads down on model development right now in the leads on all the data. And this will include not only the cost to educate of academic programming, as well as the job market data alignment. And so when we think about academic programming, we really think about it in these 5 key components. We want to ensure that we take a comprehensive approach to building the model. So we have the curriculum or the academic taxonomy. We pull in coursework and credit hour production. We pull in faculty effort and faculty compensation. And then lastly, pulling in overhead costs. Again, this is predominantly for the cost to educate component, but once that is finalized, we will then pull in job market data as well. And then lastly, we have finance and org. So when it comes to finance and org work, we typically take a look at the reporting structure. So if we move on to the next slide, this highlights the count of supervisors by direct reports. I will note that we focus on administrative individuals, so any staff or faculty with administrative responsibilities. Oh, can we go to the previous slide? Thank you. And so anything in the green that you see here highlights the count of supervisors with 3 or fewer direct reports. Anything in the purple highlights the count of supervisors with 7 or more direct reports. And typically a high count at either end of the spectrum may provide or may indicate that there's an opportunity to realign, reallocate responsibilities of supervisors. As I mentioned earlier, this does focus on administrative effort. So we recognize that it omits other supervisory responsibilities, such as overseeing student workers, overseeing external partners, overseeing faculty, etc. So again, grain of salt as we look at this data as well. And I know we are over time. So the next slide, as I mentioned earlier, this really focused on the space utilization, the academic programming, and finance and org work. We are meeting with our Compensation and Equity Advisory Committee next week to provide our current state assessment, which we will then share out with all of you in March. And in the background, we'll continue working through data analysis and identifying opportunities for, again, space utilization, academic programming, finance and org, as well as compensation and equity. So I know we got through a lot. Jennifer or Chris, anything that you'd like to add here?
No, I don't think so. Hopefully this was a good kind of overview of what we've accomplished so far in the conversations that we've had. Just again, want to say we really appreciated all the presidents working with us and having us in all of your colleges and your support of it as well. It's been great, really hearing so many different perspectives. We have the email address set up so that as we are anyone comes up with any thoughts from the colleges, any faculty, staff, et cetera, and want to share any ideas that they have with us, we do have that email set up, and we've been receiving some emails there, and we'll continue. Nothing, I would say, that we didn't hear in the meetings, which is great. So no new real information there, but that's a mechanism for continued feedback there, and meeting with the student group as well. So we're capturing the student perspective. So a lot of great conversations and continued mechanisms for feedback for us and input. I think that's all.
And Jennifer, I would like to reiterate, because I have had several people reach out to me about the true anonymity of that mailbox.
Mhm.
And I have indicated to them that it is truly anonymous, that it
Mhm.
goes straight to you.
Yep.
You will de-identify anything and simply add it to one of your data points or thematic groups. And then that becomes part of the feedback.
Exactly. That's a perfect description of that. Exactly.
So I would, all of you out there in cyber world, I would say to the system, please, again, this is vital that you have your voice heard and that you are able to be part of this project. This was set up in response to a request by people at the town halls. So Huron is listening, we are listening, and I hope that you will participate in this project. And I think Patsy Jackson had a question. Maybe not.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we are done with the progress report. On behalf of everyone, the Board of Regents, administration, and all of our staff and faculty, thank you so much for coming and presenting this along the way. I do think it goes a long way in helping people. Oh, there's Patsy again. So Regent Jackson does have a question, but before I hand it over to her, I do want to say this goes a long way in helping to assist us in that transparency and clarity discussion that you had earlier. And so to all of you, I appreciate it. And to everyone out there, staff, faculty, administration, everyone who's participating, thank you. Regent Jackson.
I'm sorry about that, Pam. I was cut off. I apologize. I just had a quick question before we disengage here today, and that was in regards to any follow-up survey. I do realize we have the mailbox, but I had asked about a possible survey that could go out across the system anonymously to all staff and all faculty with specific areas that are very consistent and align well with what I think Huron is looking at, as well as a little bit of demographics so that we can get a better handle on the information that we're getting as far as the source is it more staff providing, more faculty providing, because we may have very different perspectives. Also within that survey recommendation to Dr. Zarapata when we were working on this previously was really, to kind of garner that information so that people had that anonymity, but a little bit of direction. Maybe some people wouldn't choose to just send an email and say, hey, what about this? But through a survey that could keep us aligned on what you're focusing on here. I would love to see that go out for faculty and staff to be able to have that opportunity.
So before Huron weighs in, if they feel like they need to, Regent Jackson, Dr. Ferguson did send me that email, and I discussed at length first when I took over the project whether I should start reaching out to people, etc. And part of the problem I think that we discussed was kind of getting at cross currents and duplicating, and also having information coming in from all directions. And so right at this moment, we have decided not to proceed with that particular survey. But as we go forward, I will be talking with Huron more about that and whether it's needed. So we're not saying it's not going to be done, but we also don't want to overwhelm people with surveys and town halls and meetings, and also run the risk of getting really information that is duplicative. So that's where we are right now. And unfortunately, I had intended to reach out to you, but due to circumstances have not been able to. But I'll let Huron, if they feel like they need to, weigh in on that. But we did have an extensive conversation in our first meeting about that.
No, Pam, I think well stated. Yep, we're getting lots of great feedback, and I think it ticks all the boxes or covers all the bases of what we need. And as I said earlier too, I think the feedback that we're getting, it's a lot of the same of what we heard in meeting with over 2,000 people. So it's a lot of the same. Nothing really revelatory in what we've received thus far. So I think it's well said.
Regent Martin.
Yeah, I'd like to ask the presidents that are on here. Do you feel like this is the responses and the feedback is reflective at your colleges? And how are things going with the town hall and with this process at your individual college?
I'll jump in. Yes, I think that the feedback that was shown in the presentation by Huron is definitely reflective of some of what we heard in the town halls here at HCTC. So it really just kind of proved that it's kind of the same things that are felt across the 16 colleges. So it just kind of validated what some of the things were said at the town hall at Hazard. So it was really good to see that validation that it's across the colleges, themes that are coming up and becoming apparent. And overall, at HCTC, I've heard really good positive feedback. People are pleased to be able to interact. They were happy with the anonymous email, and I think hopefully some of my folks have been using it. I know that in addition to that, following our town hall, we had faculty and staff who had some additional comments and things that they wanted to get out to Huron. So this was before the anonymous email. So I touched base with Huron, and we came up with a plan where they gave information and made a list with their faculty chair and staff chair, and then they sent that to Huron. So it's been really good. We've felt that we've had plenty of opportunity thus far for feedback. And the peer teams, I've heard some good comments back from those who participated on the peer teams also.
I would concur, Regent Martin. Just a couple quick things to add. Likewise, I think it's a good process where Huron is getting feedback directly from some of the peer teams, because they're doing, if you will, some of the front end services. And so in some ways, the feedback from those working on the ground actually with those particular areas is going to be a little different, maybe from administration, if you will, one. Two, quite a few of the themes revolves around the system, colleges, identities, and processes. Just two quick observations by way of context. The financial aid, prior to when I was with the system before returning, financial aid was done at the local level. I think there were some challenges with financial aid, high default rates, et cetera, and the system made the determination to centralize financial aid. So I can only imagine that for those front end individuals, that would be an example that they'll probably share where the system has taken over, if you will, a process, but there was a rationale behind it. The call center is another example. So I think the context, depending on the groups that you're providing feedback from, is a consideration that I would suggest as well. The other piece is that I can't underscore enough, as Pam was mentioning, the anonymity, right? I do think that the town hall, though for some, was a little intimidating because it was being recorded, quite frankly, and people were hesitant to speak up, perception-wise, real or otherwise. So I think an opportunity for individuals to give that kind of unfiltered feedback adds credibility and transparency, certainly to the rank and file.
Good, thanks. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments before we move on to the next item on the agenda? All right, Chair Stevens.
Well, I just want to thank Huron and remind the board members, if you have any questions, please speak now, or you can address those with Pam, send it by email or so. And we certainly want your inputs and thoughts and ideas. I would ask maybe Huron can you give us a schedule or some information? What do you expect that in the report that is coming in March? And then, basically, we have a report not only in March, but we have one in April and May. And then what it's going to look like when we come to the June board meeting. And if some studies you anticipate recommendations coming prior to the June meeting or not. So I would just ask them or Pam, you to coordinate with them and to see if what the program is, where we stand on the scale. I know we're still gathering a lot of information, but I want to look forward to the June meeting. I know we've got to get through a March meeting but if there's anything that's going to be completed there or they anticipate being completed so that the board might or might not need to take action on some things.
So before I have Jennifer or Chris or Veronica speak to that, I will say I know that a lot of people want recommendations and they want to hear what's going on, but we also want to move, Huron wants to move with us carefully, even though we have an ambitious time frame. They want to move carefully and not make suggestions or recommendations that aren't yet fully vetted or that the data hasn't been fully collected. So I'm not sure that we will fully know what recommendations they have until they make the recommendations. And I know that sounds like it is what it is, but that is kind of, I think, where they would agree that we would be. But I will let Jennifer or someone else or Veronica speak to that.
Well, I just wanted to put that question out there because I know that everybody is anxious. So I know we want to stay within the process, but I just wanted to put it out there so that Huron could respond to it and maybe respond to it again in the March report. All right, go back to Huron.
Absolutely. And just to go off of what Pam was saying. So in our March conversation, we do plan on having a similar conversation around the current state, but what we've been hearing around compensation and equity. And then, like I said, in the background, we'll really be working through identifying opportunities for all 4 work streams. So we'll work with Pam to have a more tangible timeline for the board topics as well, and what opportunities we may be able to share in each.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
Any other questions from any, Wendy?
Is there any reason that we think we're going to miss that May timeline?
So I think Veronica and Jennifer, Chris, that has been a concern that I have been hearing is, do we have too ambitious a timeline? Are you feeling comfortable with the time frames and with the ability to meet the points that have been set? So I think that's the overarching question. But Regent Fletcher, if I have misspoken, please correct me.
I mean, I can answer that. I would say as of where we are right now, we're on track. So if we would identify any barriers or roadblocks, we'd be sure to let you know right away. We have great regular contact with you. You've been wonderful with us, so we would be sure to let you know. But you know, we've been moving along. So as of now, all good. So we would be sure to let you know.
Just one thing I wanted to comment is, at the end of our report is we're going to have all these opportunities. Sometimes it takes people a while to digest all of them and then decide what they want to prioritize and make decisions on. So I think if there's this intention that you all will make decisions in June and already be running with all these things come the end of this report, that maybe is an aggressive timeline. But if it's starting to synthesize, prioritize, and maybe make a few decisions by June, I think then we Huron would say that we're right on time. So that's just one concern I would raise, but I'm seeing a lot of nodding that you aren't trying to do that. So then maybe I think we're good.
Yeah, I think that's a good, Chris made up a good point. You'll have the information, but the next steps is where you could have take a little longer. That's up to you, right? But
the data will be available.
Yeah,
as
we're
per the
moving
timeline
along.
that we've
Yes,
had all along.
yeah.
Yes,
For
perfect.
sure.
We're moving along, and we would be sure to let you know if there's a barrier of some sort. We would talk with Pam and share. So yes.
Any other questions? Well, hearing none, the next Huron report meeting will be March the 21st, 2023. And with no other business, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
I'll make a motion. This is Barry.
Second. Show of hands.
Second.
Can we show hands?
Show hands and we can adjourn.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Huron.
Bye. Thank you.